Welcome to the Electric Wire Podcast. We bring you news and views on the most pressing issues facing Wisconsin's electric industry, from policymakers, executives, and customer and environmental advocates. Bringing you these discussions, we are the Customers First Coalition. Here's your host, Executive Director Kristen Jilks.
Welcome to the Electric Wire and our end of the year episode for 2023. We start off first with a year in review roundtable with both new and familiar faces, highlighting top stories, ideas, and predictions for the year. And following our roundtable, the episode will conclude with clips from several episodes I found to be incredibly informative this year. It was hard to pick just a few clips because we had so many amazing guests and such rich content this year. It would be impossible to make this podcast without our outstanding guests who are experts in their field and helped us cover everything from energy efficiency to regional energy markets to consumer advocates to innovative energy storage technologies. It's hard to capture all of Wisconsin's energy highlights into one podcast episode, and this episode did not get into details about some of the major rate cases that were decided by the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin this year. For more details about some of the commission rate proceedings this year, I encourage you to check out content from our friends at the Citizens Utility Board of Wisconsin, and I'll link to their website in the show notes. One more round of thanks. Thank you to the members of the Customers First Coalition and our outstanding board of directors for the support and direction they provide for the Electric Wire each year. And lastly, thanks to each of our listeners for your interest in energy issues and your feedback, reviews, and encouragement. It's a joy to share the Electric Wire with you, and we are looking forward to our 50th episode celebration in 2024, so stay tuned for more. Now I'll turn you over to the Year in Review Roundtable. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Carrie Pennoyer, who is the Chief of Staff to the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin Chairperson, Rebecca Valcq. Welcome to the Electric Wire for the first time, Carrie.
Thanks, Kristen.
We are also joined by Matthew Spencer, who is the Director of Government Relations at Madison Gas and Electric. Welcome back, Spence.
Thanks for having me back, Kristen. Look forward to doing this like usual.
Thank you. Also joining again is Carrie Templeton, who is now the Regulatory Relations and Policy Manager at Alliant Energy. Welcome back, Carrie.
Thanks, Kristen. It's great to see you.
Great to see you too. And last, we are joined by Andy Bochman, who is a Senior Grid Strategist at the Idaho National Lab. Andy, thank you so much. You are new to the Year in Review episode, but Andy is not new to the Electric Wire. Andy joined us for episode 25 in June of 2022. The episode was titled Nuclear Power, Reliability, and Global Weirding, which is your term, Andy. So thanks for coming back to join us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Kristen, and everybody. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. All right, let's get started right away with our first question, and that is, what are your top energy stories of the year? Spence, we're going to start with you.
Sure. So there's been a stall on wind in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin had their first wind turbine utility scale project come online this April. It's MG&E's project co-owned with WEC Energy Group, and we're happy to see a new transition to wind. We've had some solar, obviously not some solar, but a lot of solar coming online, a lot of projects, but it's nice to see wind being used in the state of Wisconsin.
Thanks, Spence. All right, Carrie Templeton, how about you?
I would say, going back to my commission roots, I think the appointment of Summer Strand to the commission is probably one of the top energy stories of the year. It's the first time the commission has all appointees of Governor Evers, and seeing that in the decisions that are coming out. So I think that was one of the top stories of the year.
Agreed, Carrie. I thought that was a big news story this year, and we're all so happy to see Summer at the Public Service Commission. She's done a great job in the 9 months that she's been there.
Agreed. She's been a great addition to the commission.
Kara, how about you? What's your top story of the year?
I had the same one, Commissioner Strand being appointed to the commission, but also wanted to add Commissioner Huebner's unanimous election to serve as the OMS board president, which it's great to have his voice there.
Agreed. That's a big deal for Wisconsin to be represented at OMS that way, the Organization of MISO States. And we do have a podcast episode on the Organization of MISO States, I should add, from this year. Marcus Hawkins joined in August to talk more about that. So if anybody wants to learn more, go ahead and go back to that episode. All right, Andy, we're looking at you next. What do you think is the top energy story? And I'm expecting a little bit more of a global perspective, but stop me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's in the old Sesame Street, there was a really helpful exercise called "One of these things is not like the other," and so that's probably me. But you don't even need that explanation.
That's why you're here, Andy. We wanted to, we want to know more about what you're seeing, I guess, nationally and globally on the energy scene.
Sure, and just for orientation, I mean, I have solar panels on my roof. I have a new Chevy Bolt in the garage with a level 2 charger. I do care about Wisconsin's orientation on energy matters, and sometimes get to weigh in at the city and occasionally at the state level. So that's pretty cool. But in terms of something global, I would say that, and it's recency bias too. I'd say what came out of COP28 in the UAE is clear indication that fossil fuel use, despite boosts in renewables, and there's some downtrending renewable storage too related to offshore wind in the United States anyway, but that fossil fuels are going to continue to expand at a regular clip. And that means the atmosphere is going to continue to warm and the oceans are going to continue to warm. And since you said global weirding earlier, we're going to have more of that, unfortunately. So I'll stop.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. And just noting that Andy is joining us from Milwaukee. So he may work for Idaho National Lab, but he is based here in Wisconsin in Milwaukee. So we're lucky to have you here as a resource, Andy.
Glad to be here. It's love it.
Let's move on to our top sustainable energy developments of the year. And Carrie, I'm going to start with you on this one. What do you think?
Thanks, Kristen. Well, at Alliant Energy, we moved with our Clean Energy Blueprint. It's our resource plan outlining for the transition to clean renewable energy. A key initial component has been the construction and being placed into service 12 solar projects that were approved by the commission. And it was a big story for Alliant in 2022, and it was for this year as well. In 2022, we placed 3 solar projects totaling 250 megawatts into service in Wisconsin. But in December alone, this year, we're going to double our solar generation capacity. We're going to add at least 300 megawatts this year, if not more. All 12 of our large utility scale projects totaling over 1,000 megawatts are going to be completed by the middle of next year. So it's going to be a huge increase in our solar capacity in the state, and obviously for Alliant Energy. We just earlier this month installed the final solar panel of all 12 projects at our Beaver Dam site. So our team installed over 2.6 million panels for the 12 projects. So huge accomplishment for our construction team. Really proud of all the work done by our teams to get those done and in place. And of course, we're going to see great impacts for our customers and reducing fuel costs into the future, enhancing reliability. So for us, that was a big story for us for this year.
That's awesome. That's a lot of solar. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Kara, let's go to you next. How about you? What were the top sustainable energy developments that you were following this year?
Yes. So my top development is the PSC's partnership with the Wisconsin Electric Cooperatives and Community Action Programs to support the development of community solar projects, which are really designed to benefit low and moderate income customers. And the first one was launched in fall, so just a couple months ago, which is Energize Wisconsin in Vernon County, excuse me. And that's a partnership between Cooley Cap, Vernon Electric, and the PSC's Office of Energy Innovation. And it gives households with a high energy burden, access to community solar benefits. So they see those utility costs come down and can be part of, the clean energy transition. We really don't want to leave anyone behind in the transition. So really having more community members be part of it is great and makes it my top choice.
That's great. Thank you, Kara. Andy, what about you? How about your thoughts on sustainable energy projects this year?
I'll come at you from the orientation of the Department of Energy and the Idaho National Lab, although it's not the only one working these issues, is that it was kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back in the small modular reactor and microreactor world, to the extent that folks will allow that nuclear energy has potential to be clean baseload, upon which we might put tons and tons of more wind and solar and storage. That some significant developments on the positive side have happened with SMRs, and one particular project called UAMPS pulled back. I think they thought it was going to be ultimately too expensive. Everything with the supply chain these days, including wind turbines, for example, is getting pulled in different directions and looking more or less attractive, but still progress proceeds apace on these new nuclear designs that I think promise to be more affordable and safer than what we've had in the past. So we'll have to keep an eye on them this coming year.
Thanks, Andy. How about you, Spence?
Sure. Earlier this year, Focus on Energy was chosen to be the administrator of the IR funds coming into the state, which is interesting. So like they have their pot of money at the state level. Now they have a pot of money coming in from the federal level. We're working with our locals. I think I've talked about this a number of times, but making sure that the dollars get deployed as soon as possible to electrify homes, create a federal program for energy efficiency in the state of Wisconsin, behind the meter issues for consumers, low-income consumers, making their homes more affordable, energy efficient, and as we begin to electrify inside the homes with heat pumps. I know Chris has talked about that in prior podcasts, but I figured I'd at least bring that up for him. So
perfect, thanks. And I wanted to here just give a quick shout out to the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change. They award Climate Champion Awards each year, and I think it's Kathy Kuhn started this at Dane County a couple years back, and I think it's such a good way to help motivate people and recognize positive, sustainable developments each year. And I wanted to also give a shout out to Creative Learning Preschool for winning a Climate Champion Award for their work doing energy efficiency and sustainable measures there to help save money and also reduce emissions. So really proud of them and the work they did there as well. Now we're going to move to the most promising new energy idea or breakthrough of the year. And Andy, I'm going to start with you for this one.
So this is, I guess I'm going to be on the dark side of things, right? That we need to build out wind and solar as it is so affordable, backed by storage like crazy. But pivoting to the climate resilience side, I think there's a recognition increasingly that even as we do that, we need to look at our assets, look at the functions that they deliver, and marrying them with climate model projections, figure out how to make sure that they're going to be okay. I think Wisconsin is in a pretty decent place climate-wise compared to some other states, but still temperatures will be rising and precipitation events will be getting stranger and stranger as we go along. So recognition that we will need to be hardening and make ourselves more resilient to what's coming at us in coming years.
I think at the state level, the governor and the commission and all the utilities at least have set up their goals in a way that by 2050 we'll all be hopefully carbon free or net zero carbon, excuse me. And then just simply by being an MG&E customer, you don't have to do anything. It's 80% by 2030. And I think the rest of the utilities can kind of say the same thing, that we're doing our best to get there as fast as possible.
Thanks, Spence. Kara, we'll turn to you next.
Okay, mine is Alliant's Energy Dome, which is so exciting. And, I think we had to get really innovative on storage. And while I could not explain how it works, and I've even watched YouTube videos and tried to figure it out, it is just really exciting, and really exciting that it's coming to Wisconsin. So I'm sure Carrie knows all the
yes, Carrie, tell us more about this dome. What is this and why is this a good idea?
Yeah, not surprisingly, that was my pick for most promising new energy idea this year. We announced earlier this year with our partners, MG&E, and WC Energy, UW Madison, EPRI, and Shell, this Columbia Energy Storage Project, which is being supported by the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. Is going to be the first project of its kind in the U.S. and only the second one in the world to demonstrate long duration energy storage by using compressed CO2. We're just really excited about the possibility of what we'll be able to learn from the project. And it's part of our efforts to secure federal funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law and then incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act for the benefit of our customers. And we're just really excited. If you haven't seen it, like Kara said, there's all kinds of YouTube videos and it does look like an inflated dome. So you'll be hearing more about that definitely in 2024. It's going to require construction authorization from the commission. So we're excited to move forward on that and hope it'll be operational in 2027. And it's going to be at the site of our Columbia coal plant that's slated to retire in June of 2026. So we're very excited. It's going to demonstrate a commercial scale the energy storage technology is a grid-tied firm capacity asset. So we're excited to see what the applications are for that for the future, and all of the partners will be able to benefit from the learning, and EPRI potentially could help us with applications throughout the country and potentially the world too. So we're excited about it.
It reminds me of another podcast episode we did earlier this year. We had representatives from Dairyland Power Cooperative along with a Michigan Tech professor talking about using abandoned mines for pumped hydroelectric power storage. So they literally use these old mines and they pump the water up and they'll release it back down when energy is needed. And it's an exciting new technology that Dairyland Power Cooperative is exploring, and I'm excited to hear more about that in 2024 as well, to see how that exploration is going. Spence, did you have a idea or breakthrough?
You know, all the utilities are starting to look at storage like this, battery storage. The solar facilities are going to have storage, and I think it's just as technology comes online, these batteries are going to get more and more efficient and be able to store more and more. So with the Columbia Energy Storage Project, the Energy Dome, batteries, just getting more and more unique of how we look at reducing our footprint.
Andy, you talked about resilience and climate resilience. We had a project come online in Boaz, Wisconsin this year. It's a microgrid. So it's the first one that we have in our service territory, and it was really to help that community with resilience with increased weather issues. There's one major artery coming into Boaz, so they were experiencing outages. So now they have a microgrid in place that we worked really closely with them, and it was really exciting to see that come online this year. So
that's great. If that can be an exemplar that others might mimic with more confidence for you guys having done it, that's excellent.
Thanks, Andy and Carrie. All right. Did anything shock you this year? Kara, I'm going to start with you.
Yes, well, I've had a lot of shocks this year because I started at the PSC in March. And I think it's quite the learning curve. But the big shock that I had was just how much work this small agency, the PSC, does, and how brilliant and professional the staff here are. Just the amount of orders flowing through the PSC in a week is astounding. And, we do broadband, water, gas and electric utilities, gas pipeline safety, the state energy office, focus on energy. We have a really robust consumer affairs department. And then we have our business team, in the background, helping us all go. So I've just been stunned by that. And, I ask a random question, and within a day, I have like a 6-page write-up answering the question for me. So it's an awesome team. There's no way that I could know what was going on without the 150 people here making it all happen.
I love it. Kara, thank you so much. Spence, what shocked you this year?
Kind of recent, last week. I would say for me and the company, the decision on the MREA decision, I don't think it was too shocking, but the commission denied the MREA petition for like a broad third-party financing. There was more for information that the commission asked for that they weren't able to receive. So I don't want to say I'm maybe not shocked, but it was a very big decision that the commission made requesting more information in the future. So I guess we'll kind of wait and see if it comes back. But other than that, it looks like it's got to be a decision at the legislature still for a change to be made. Otherwise, status quo.
Got it. Thanks, Spence. And Spence is referring to a docket that was open at the commission, as he mentioned, by the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. They were seeking a declaratory ruling, and the commission, I think, simply said they aren't able to make that ruling with the information provided. So it's going to be, either subject to additional requests or back in the hands of the legislature. Carrie, let's go to you next. What was your shock this year?
I think it was more maybe a surprise for some people. Maybe not a shock, but the number of interveners in rate cases this year was exponentially greater than it has been in the past. It kind of ties into actually one of my predictions from last year when I was still wearing my commission hat. And, the commission's made a lot of efforts to increase non-traditional voices in the process. And we had a number of first-time interveners in all of the rate cases this year. And that was really exciting to see. But I think it surprised some people that the level of engagement, and I'm just really excited to see more voices in the process and more input.
All right, Andy, any shocking news this year for you?
Sure. First of all, I'm going to not mention the fact that global emissions hit an all-time high, as did global temperatures in 2023. I'm not shocked by that, but so I'm not mentioning it. I do have a good, more hyper-local, even Madison local shock, and it's mainly a happy one. And that is that I did a couple training sessions with folks from the IBEWs across the Midwest, led by IBEW 2150. And my part, of course, was climate resilience related to things that they work on and care about. I was expecting, I don't know, maybe stereotypic. I had them stereotyped because I hadn't dealt with union folks that much, that they would have a variety of opinions on climate risk, including opinions that, what are you talking about? What's climate? Because I know I was just down in Texas and they don't hardly use that word at all. The IBEW folks, they were unanimously in the two sessions that I did, they all were sharing anecdotes about their own experience, about how their work was changing, how their work was changed by the fact that weather in Wisconsin and some of our surrounding states was pronounced dramatically different than in the past, and it was requiring a lot of adaptation to make sure they were still doing it right. So I guess on the happy side is that they had full awareness and they weren't fighting it and they were adjusting accordingly. I thought that was a good sign for everybody.
Good, thank you. Something that shocked me this year, we're actually recording this episode while we are missing a public hearing that is happening on legislation that would enable Wisconsin to receive National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure funding, which would provide federal funding for EV fast chargers across the state. So it's $78 million that could be coming into the state if we can find consensus on this legislation. CFC has been a supporter of finding consensus in the past, and we're happy to see kind of a coalition of supporters of the legislation that crosses the political spectrum, everyone from Quick Trip to environmental groups to local governments. There are a lot of proponents of this legislation, and a lot of people had to give a little to get there, but I am hopeful that something will move through the legislature and be available for signing by the governor so that we can get Wisconsin on track to receive some of these federal funds for EV charging. All right, let's move on. I would like to hear from you. If you are listening to the Electric Wire throughout the year, were there any favorite episodes that stood out to you? Spence, I'm going to start with you first.
Sure. In the past, it's been a lot of, I think you started off in person, then we did these Zooms, but you had 2 podcasts that were on-site tours or on-site meetings at the Capitol. We did a tour of the MG&E charging hub that kind of links back to what you just said about EVs. And then the O'Brien Solar Field out in Fitchburg, just kind of showing the audience and speaking with engineers and how these projects came about and what they do, I thought was interesting. And then with the MEUW one, just it's good you're meeting with like real people that work at these smaller utilities across the state and understanding their business models. And I specifically like the end with Rich Heineman.
That was one of my favorite things to record too.
When you work in the industry and you're still learning stuff, Kara, you're gonna figure this out very quickly since you've only been there since May. But it's always nice to get a different piece of information that you've never really understood before. So
I'm going to link to all of these episodes in the show notes, but yes, the episode on MEUW's 95th anniversary celebration, there's an interview with Richard Heineman that begins about 15 minutes in. Richard is a longtime energy attorney representing municipal utilities, and he's just a wealth of knowledge. And so I loved that episode as well for that reason too. All right, Kara, how about you?
Yes, I thought the episode with Cindy Smith on process and participation at the PSC was fantastic. I learned a lot. I think it should be like required listening for anybody who comes along to this field. She walks through so many things in a really like helpful way. But I do have to give a shout out to the MEUW episode because I have a 5-year-old. So the thought about a parade bucket trucks was just like thrilling. So those 2 would be my answer.
That's fun. That was fun being there on site and seeing all the bucket trucks from smaller communities from across the state. It was pretty cool. And there is video of that on the YouTube channel as well. I'm gonna echo what you just said, Kara, and the episode 38 with Cindy Smith was one of my favorite episodes as well. Cindy is an old friend, and it was just a lovely conversation. And also, this episode was quoted during a PSC open meeting in August. So Chairperson Valcq actually cited Cindy's comments on the podcast episode about commissioners sort of having to set aside personal feelings or opinions and simply rely on what's in the law and in the code when making decisions. And so I was very excited to hear that an episode of The Electric Wire got mentioned in an open meeting. So, all right, Andy, have you had a chance to listen to any episodes this year? And if so, what's your favorite?
I'm going to play fast and loose with the this year part, potentially.
Nice.
There was a time not too long ago when you did a podcast with a researcher who I don't think wasn't from Wisconsin, but that's as close as I can get to her name, was talking about in the deregulated markets, which sounds like a positive thing to many consumers because they have choice. The downside of that, and I'm a We Energy customer in Milwaukee. I don't have a choice, but I hear people grumbling all the time, right? What she was calling out was the fact that, at least in some of the regions she looked at around the country, that it's kind of like your cable or your data bill. Like you get a special one-time 1-year incentive rate, and as the year comes to a close, it's going to probably double unless you get back on and start checking out other competing rates, and you have to go through all the laborious, time-consuming parts of switching to a new provider because your old provider is going to double, but then maybe they'll negotiate with you. That sounded pretty horrible to me, and it made me appreciate a much better, actually, more than a little better, the process that we go through with the PSC, and folks like We Energies to try to get at a reasonable rate that doesn't make you have to go through all of that process every year. That just sounded like a nightmare to me. And if that is the case from y'all's point of view, to at least some extent, I really enjoyed that episode and what it taught me.
Thank you so much, Andy. That was one of my favorite episodes from last year as well. The episode title is The Reality of Retail Choice with Laurel Peltier, and I will link to that in the show notes as well. It's a must listen episode. If anyone, hears talk of deregulating or retail choice, yes, Laurel brings up great points about the reality of the situation. You can talk about any hypothetical benefits, but the reality on the ground doesn't live up to the hype.
Plus, with
Thanks,
regulation
Andy.
in the state too, you have the peace of mind to know that your neighbor's not getting like a better deal from a different customer. You know that every single customer within a service territory, whether you're residential or business, is all paying the same for the energy that they consume, which is why we do it in open meetings with Kara and Chairman Valcq. It's the easiest way to make sure that it's treated as fairly as possible.
That's decent, Matthew.
Thanks for that, Spence. All right, Carrie, favorite episode on your end?
Well, I have to agree, Cindy's the best. And it's always great when there's a light shown on Cindy, whether she likes it or not, and the critical role she plays at the commission. So that was great. But I'm actually going to pick one you mentioned earlier, and that was your interview with Marcus Hawkins, director of OMS. And he just has such infectious, positive energy. I love talking to Marcus and loved listening to him on the podcast take a topic that is really mystifying for a lot of people, very complicated, and how he breaks it down and makes it really interesting and accessible. And I just thought that was a really great episode. And it's really important for our state for us to have a role, and the commission staff is very involved, and even more so now, as Kara mentioned, with Tyler and Commissioner Huebner being the chair. So yeah, it's exciting.
Agreed. It's hard for me to pick favorites because I see the unique qualities of every episode, and even Marcus feels like talking to an old friend, even if I, only see him a couple times a year. It's just, he's such a cool person, and yeah, we're really lucky to have him in the role that he's in, and we were lucky to have him here on the Electric Wire as well. So I am going to run through quickly. At the end of our year in review roundtable, we always make predictions and then go back and check in on those predictions. So last year we had Chris Hubbock joining us. Unfortunately, Chris took a different role and isn't as involved in utility policy. So he said he'd be listening to this episode. But Chris predicted last year that we would have more unanimous votes at the Public Service Commission as a new appointment was made. That appointment had not been announced yet, but we have seen more unanimous votes at the PSC. Jen Schilling was here last year as well. Jen has actually moved on from Dairyland Power Cooperative now, and we miss her. She had been on the CFC board as well. Wishing Jen all the best. But Jen made an awesome prediction last year that Miss Wisconsin, Grace Stanke, who is a proponent of nuclear power, she predicted that Grace would become Miss America. And I want to say it was within 48 hours that Jen's prediction came true from when we recorded that. So that was really exciting to see. And it was exciting to see Grace travel the country and travel the world, sharing her platform on clean energy and renewable energy. So congratulations to Grace. And she's someone who I would love to have on the podcast someday as well. So we're gonna try to make that happen as well. Carrie talked about having more interveners at the Public Service Commission, which, as she mentioned already, we've definitely seen more interveners there. Spence spoke about federal funding for electric vehicles as a prediction. So I'm going to let you expound more on that, Spence, but I think we're getting closer and closer to seeing that as well. And then I predicted we would have more discussions on nuclear power as well. And CFC did host our power breakfast in April, focused on advanced nuclear technologies. So Now I'm interested to hear more from each of you. If you have any comments or reflections on those predictions from last year, as well as what your predictions are for 2024. Carrie, I'm going to go ahead and start with you for this one.
Thanks. I think everyone was pretty spot on with their predictions last year, so I'm impressed. For this next year, I think it's going to be similar, at least before the commission, with a significant number of dockets. The energy transition is still underway. It's not done. So as we've been talking about, there'll be more proposals for innovative, I'm sure, customer offerings, but also additional generation as coal plants are slated to retire in the next few years, the remaining coal plants in the state. So I think that's my prediction is no slowdown in the unprecedented number of dockets at the commission as the transition continues, and the continued work to balance the new generation with customer affordability.
Excellent. Thanks, Carrie. All right, Spence, let's go to you next. Any predictions for 2024?
I'm not predicting that the VW settlement dollars do anything. I've done that too many times. But you mentioned earlier with the hearings going on and the coalition of businesses, utilities, municipal governments, at least being open to the idea of this EV charging bill moving forward. I hope that it gets signed in 2024. And then it's the chicken and the egg. It's more chargers lead to more EVs, with the prices coming down in EVs. You'll hopefully see more on the road. And in terms of the legislature, there's a bill being discussed right now related to transmission that would guarantee that Wisconsin employees continue to build out transmission across the state. There's a bidding process in there to make sure keeps the prices low and ensures reliability for all customers in Wisconsin. So I hope to see that bill move forward.
Thanks, Spence. Kara, how about you? Predictions?
Yes, well, to comment on last year on Carrie's prediction, we did have and I know Carrie gave a shout out to the YouTube channel last year. We've had increased public participation so much, we now have 2 YouTube channels. So I think that's worth shouting out.
I didn't know that. Tell us more about this second YouTube channel.
Yeah, if you go to our YouTube channel, it's linked there, but we had so many, public meetings and things going on at the same time as hearings that we had to have 2. But we're happy that we have that now and can be a little more flexible with that. So I think my prediction though for 2024 is just the data center topic. It's such a big topic nationally, and just the increasing load growth forecasts. But data centers are also so committed to the owners, the builders are so committed to their carbon impact. So I think we're seeing this unique pressure to increase generation to support the data centers while expanding renewable energy options. So we're, at the table in those conversations and really looking forward to being part of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Kara. Andy, how about you?
I can't comment too thoroughly on the predictions I didn't make last year, so I'll go straight ahead into the coming year and say that, and I liked hearing the comment about data centers. I believe my prediction is that the PSC will be having discussions formally, or at least behind the scenes, about the possible positive impacts of AI as well as risks. We've been interviewing suppliers of grid equipment. All of their websites, the usual suspects say, oh, now enhanced with more AI than ever. So we've been coming at them and saying, that sounds interesting. How thoroughly have you tested and vetted these things, especially because you're going to put them on the grid? Customers are, and utilities are, and their customers are going to depend on this. So I think you're going to see that just as we're all so inundated with that term, it's a kind of a dawning awareness, the way cybersecurity was a while ago, that AI is now both an opportunity to investigate, but also a risk to make sure that it's thoroughly explored before we green light putting too much of it on critical infrastructure elements like grid equipment.
Thanks, Andy. I have one question. I wanted to pick your brain while we've got you here. We, Customers First has has been hosting discussions about small modular reactors and the future of nuclear power. And this year we read a headline about a setback that NuScale had canceled a project in Idaho for a small modular reactor project that they had been working on. What do you see as the future of small modular reactors? Was that really a setback? Can they come back from it? What are your thoughts?
It's definitely a setback because, we're trying to revive an industry in a sense that's gone, at least in the United States, quite dormant. And so any prospective agreement, any deal that's coming up to build a new one, these new designs that are blessed by the NRC and the DOE, seems very promising. I think what was happening, I mentioned supply chain issues earlier, that as the cost per megawatt was seeming to be rising in their estimates as they're getting closer and closer to construction, the several different communities that had, said, we want to be a part of this and we will commit to paying for it, they got cold feet, and one by one they pulled out until there was too many, and then they had to kill it. I think might look it up. It's UAMPS, UAMPS, which is an acronym that stood for this coalition of different communities that were going to be drawing their electricity from this NuScale SMR. Nevertheless, in other parts of the United States and around the world, there's super high interest in it. Again, both the small modular reactors, which come in when you daisy chain them together into the sizes about a mid-size to mid to large coal plant, all the way down to micro reactors, which can be as small as a megawatt up to, say, 50. They can have real local use and, to earlier comment, microgrid applications as well. I think the arrows are pointing in a really positive direction for that industry, but it's going to be bumpy, almost like a startup, right? There's going to be bumps, and there's a lot of negativity about nuclear energy in the United States for reasons that are, we discuss on other episodes. There's also now a lot of interest fueled by concern about climate.
Thank you. I appreciate that perspective, Andy. I'm going to save my prediction for my all the power moment as well. But I want to get to our final question for all of our guests, and that is, if you had all the power in 2024, what would you do with it? And Andy, I'm going to start with you.
Just to keep it more tractable, I'll just try to stick to the state, right? And say that I'm hearing whisperings and more than whisperings of potential for build out of EV infrastructure. I've driven my EV in different parts of the country, and I just flew back on a red eye from California, where every third car in the Bay Area appears to be a Tesla or a Bolt or some of the new things. I'd really say, if anybody is on the fence, because there's people that are leaning, they're thoroughly in one camp or thoroughly in the other. If we could use of all of our energies of persuasion to help lean into the idea of building out the infrastructure, that would be really tremendous. And it would show Wisconsin, if not a leader in that space, is certainly playing a faster follower role compared to some of the other states that are out there. I'd love to see that. Awesome.
Thanks, Andy. Spence, we're going to you next.
To kind of piggyback off that, with the NEVI funds, I think there's only been one groundbreaking across the country to use the federal dollars. I just hope the rest of the country, including Wisconsin's, able to start building out this infrastructure. I think Wisconsin's one of two states that hasn't at least received the funds because of the way our law is structured to allow charging by the kilowatt hour. So again, I'm the same way. We'd like to see the infrastructure build out an EV. That's if I had all the power, I'd say the exact same thing. Use the IRA dollars as soon as possible. And I guess speaking more CFC related, I hope you have more boots on the ground podcasts in the future. So
thanks, Spence. We'll take that in under advisement. All right, Kara, how about you? What would you do if you had all the power?
Yes. First, I'm just going to echo what Cindy Smith said, which was to give the PSC staff pay raises. And to my previous answer about what great work everyone does here, we want to keep people. So it would be great if we could do that. But that truly would take all the power. But my other one is just continuing on Carrie's work from the past, which is demystifying the PSC and getting more voices to the table. And I think under Becky or Chair Valcq's leadership, we have been able to do this, still not to what we'd like to. You know, we're so constrained by statute and our processes. We're following the code and the statute. So we can't really turn everything upside down and do it different. But how do we make it easier to understand, get more people to the table who might only have 30 minutes in the entire week or 10 minutes to pay attention to this, but we need to hear their voice. So that would be mine, if I had all the power in the world.
Thanks, Kara. All right, Carrie, we're going to you next.
For my all the power, it draws from, I think, some of the answers that we've heard to previous questions. You know, we have data centers coming to our service territory and throughout the state looking for opportunities. We want to see more EVs, and so that's a switch to electric use for transportation. We're seeing increased use of electricity, it's not stagnant or declining like it hasn't been in the past. And we're also going to be retiring coal generation to accomplish other goals. So we're going to need to build. And Andy touched on that too, you know, the rate of the need for additional renewables and batteries to be put into service to accomplish the goals and to meet the transition, and the increasing need for electricity. What I would really like to see is improving our domestic manufacturing. There's supply chain constraints more than anything, I think, that is preventing some of this from occurring as quickly as we would like it to, especially transformers and panels. Batteries, whether that's for EVs or for utility level storage, just so we can ensure the transition isn't slowed because of those supply chain constraints. And also it would create innumerable number of jobs for folks, really great, good paying jobs and worker training benefits for all kinds of folks who are looking for highly skilled jobs into an industry that's going to continue on into the future.
Well, thank you
So that
so
would be
much.
mine.
Thanks, Carrie. All right, I am going to share one anecdote for my all the power moment, and that some of you have already heard. But earlier this year, when the Taylor Swift's Eras Tour was making its way around the country, my daughter Viola had an idea for me to get Taylor Swift on my podcast. She thought it'd be a really popular episode, and Taylor could talk about how she uses energy to light up her stadiums for her concerts. So I thought that was a great idea. And if I had all the power, I really would love to see that happen. So wanted to
Shoot for
give,
the stars.
yeah,
Shoot for
right.
the stars.
So that's my wish. We're very excited about the success of the podcast. Even if we don't have Taylor Swift, we have all of you, the best guests in the world, that make this podcast so helpful, so informational to so many listeners. Our Power Breakfast this year is going to be a celebration of the electric wire for our 50th episode. And we are going to be revisiting some of our most popular podcast episodes and bringing some of those guests back, including an invite to Laurel Peltier to talk about the reality of retail choice. We're going to be talking more about pumped hydro storage using abandoned mines. That was our top episode of this year. As well as potentially some more on SMRs. Well, with that, I want to say thank you to each of our guests for joining today, and we look forward to chatting more, recapping our predictions with you again next year on the electric wire. Wishing everybody a very happy and successful 2024.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks to our roundtable for helping us recap this year. Wanted to share a few clips now from some of our top episodes this year. Our first clip is from episode 37 of The Electric Wire, exploring the possibility of pumped hydro energy storage within abandoned mines, with guests Brent Ridge, President and CEO of Dairyland Power Cooperative, John Carr, who is the Vice President of Strategic Growth at Dairyland Power Cooperative, and Timothy Scarlett, Associate Professor of Archaeology and Anthropology at Michigan Tech University. In this clip, you'll hear Brent Ridge discussing the energy landscape and the need for affordable utility-scale energy storage solutions.
And we'll see at any given day, at least 70% of the MISO output is covered by fossil fuel resources. About 10 to 15% is nuclear. And frankly, we need a viable, non-carbon emitting, either storage option that can discharge for multiple hours per day. And we think pump hydro does that. So traditional pump hydro is definitely connected to a river and moves the water up to a higher elevation. That creates a whole lot of challenges environmentally. But the mine storage concept of using existing abandoned underground mines to create the head differential that can create the energy in the evening or during peak times, it really seems to be one of the better solutions right now being looked at. And the key thing is providing a large amount of energy. So utility scale energy, think 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts, 300 megawatts, and provide it for 8 to 12 hours. That is currently what batteries cannot do that pump storage can do. And what mine storage does is allows us to research and look at and fill that gap that the batteries right now are not. I'm not saying in a number of years batteries won't mature to that point. So really, as we see new proposed government regulation like the EPA has been issuing, that puts us in a very difficult position. If they're going to take away our fossil fuel resources quicker than the industry can handle, we need an option, and mine storage is part of that. So talked a little bit about the macro MISO impact of gas prices, and then sort of worked our way back into, we've really got to have a good storage option that discharges energy in utility scale amounts over a significant duration.
I enjoyed that clip because I thought it helped set the background and take a peek into the future of carbon-free energy grid resources. Our next clip is from episode 38 of The Electric Wire. Cindy Smith discusses public participation and process at the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. Cindy Smith is the Chief Legal Counsel at the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. Take a listen now.
I'm really proud of the processes that the commission has developed. We have always, I think, been a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of having all of our documents publicly available on our electronic records filing system. So there is a very high level of transparency from the information that is available. And working in conjunction with that, we try to meet the public where the public is and evolve in that process and make our own internal process changes so that we can be maximizing the opportunities for the public to participate in our proceedings. So whether that be, originally it was all in-person, public hearings, but then as the internet and computers became more, providing that opportunity for people to submit comments via the website. Then it's evolved since the pandemic of, providing an option to be remote and having our hearings all via Zoom, and also having hybrid hearings where there's both in person as well as the opportunity. So there's a number of opportunities for the public to participate, and we try to explain the different parts of a process in which the public can participate. Depending upon the scope of the project and our obligations under WEPA, there may be specific comments dedicated just to the environmental components of the project. As our environmental analyst looks at the potential environmental impacts of a project and whether or not there's the potential for significant impact and whether an environmental impact statement has been done. So there's a role for the public to comment on those issues, but then there's also a role to comment just on the merits of a case, whether that be a rate case or a construction case or some other commission proceeding. And I think people don't appreciate that just because the commission may not call out Jane Smith's comment, that doesn't mean that the commission did not review and seriously consider all of the public comments. I know that they read everything and they take that to heart. And sometimes it does, specific comments may get raised, but just because a public commenter submitted a comment online or went to a hearing, but then the commission doesn't maybe directly address their concern, it certainly doesn't mean that it wasn't considered. And I think that's an important point for folks to know is the commission does read the whole record and considers all of the arguments for and against, and then ultimately comes to its decision on what evidence it finds more persuasive.
Well, as you heard, Cindy is a true expert in her field, and it was so helpful to have her here on the Electric Wire to discuss the process set up for public participation at the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. We'll turn now to our third and final clip on this episode. This clip is from episode 33 of the Electric Wire. Commissioner Ellen Nowak reflects on her 12 years at the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin with Senator Julian Bradley. Senator Bradley's all the power moment summed up nicely a sentiment I feel from a lot of guests: the need to preserve electric reliability for customers and focus on an all of the above approach as it relates to the clean energy transition. Here's Senator Bradley now.
As we take a look here in Wisconsin at our energy policy, it's important for us to have an all of the above approach to energy. So there is certainly a place for green and renewable energy in our state, as there is within our entire country and within this world. But it's important in a place like Wisconsin, whereas we've just seen another pretty bad storm come through, another winter storm come through, that we don't have sole reliance on one form of energy or one form of power. People expect to be able to flip a switch and turn their lights on. They expect to be able to fire up their heat and stay warm. Here in Wisconsin, as those winters hit, not being able to do so could be very deadly. So it's important to keep that reliability, and we can only do that through ensuring that we do have an all of the above approach. That doesn't mean we can't invest in and continue to work through, as technology advances, adding in renewable energy. I think that's a great addition to, but reliability and cost have to continue to weigh in as we're working on those. So if I had all the power in the industry, it would just be to use to ensure that our consumers are always coming first, the end users, and ensuring that, we're not doing any energy policy that, puts them at risk.
That's the last clip I have for you today. Again, I want to express my sincerest gratitude to all of our special guests from this year and to each of you for listening. Happy New Year.
Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. Please support our work. You can subscribe to the Electric Wire podcast if you haven't already, and you can follow us on Twitter at The Electric Wire. Thanks also to the members of the Customers First Coalition for supporting this podcast. Our members are Dairyland Power Cooperative, Madison Gas and Electric, the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin, WPPI Energy, the Citizens Utility Board, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local 2150, and the Wisconsin Electric Cooperatives Association. Thanks again for listening. We'll have a new episode next month.